Hello, I am Sue Bell. I'm from Susan Bell Research in Sydney, and I'm talking today about a new research technique that I've developed called sensemaking research. It's exploratory qualitative research for complex problems. And what it does is it helps us understand how consumers, customers, potential customers, whoever they are, navigate and make sense of complex social issues like sustainability or any form of complex human behavior. And what this means is that we need to go beyond, or it gives us the opportunity really, to go beyond some of the cliches, I'm going to say, in research and qualitative research, one of which is that people make decisions and that we can think of what people do as decision making. I argue, and sense making theory backs this up, that that is only true some of the time. It goes against the whole idea of biases and nudges, because sense making research is by its very nature not judgmental and does not criticize people for doing things. Or thinking things. And it also goes beyond the cliche that we hear for qualitative research and have done for many years, which is that it's about digging deeper. That's always seemed a bit problematic to me because, like, how deep can you go? But sense-making theory and the research that I've developed around it says that we actually need to go broader rather than deeper to really understand. So we understand someone's whole world rather than getting really, really deep into their psychology. So what is sense making? It's the obvious question at this point. And it's many things. First of all, it's a drive. It's a drive that seems to be innate, that people have, that we all have, that to make sense of situations when we're in, when they're complex or ambiguous. It doesn't, it's, if you think about being in some situation which was chaotic or where you just weren't sure what to do, what you instinctively wanted to do was to figure it out and to make yourself comfortable, kind of it's almost like grounding yourself to know what to do next. And that's what at a kind of biological level, that's what sense making is. As someone described it, Deborah Ancona described it, it involves coming up with a plausible understanding, a map of a shifting world, testing this map with others through data collection, action, and conversation, and then refining or abandoning the map, depending on how credible it is. So one way we can think about this is that this is what consumers, customers, etc., do when they are uncertain what to do. So they are wanting to do something, perhaps it's to support the environment, or it could be anything where things are uncertain and the world is changing all the time. They want to figure it out. They don't expect to get a PhD in the subject, and they just want to figure it out. And they do that by observing, by getting information, by doing things and talking. And then they can change it. So that's what sense making is in the real world. We all do it. So what we're all doing when we're sense making is trying to find meaning in that ambiguity and meaning in that uncertainty. And here are some quotes that come from the gurus of sense-making theory. The first one, Carl Weick, says, sense-making starts with chaos. And what he means by that is that you don't need to sense-make if there's no chaos or there's no complexity. If life is simple, it's just a question of, I don't know, the doorbell rings, you answer the door. That's not chaotic, that's not uncertain. You don't need to make sense of that. But we've all been through a pandemic and still going through it in some cases. And that was chaotic. And we all had to figure out how we were going to each deal with that. Another of the gurus is Bernadette Irvin, and she describes it similarly, really, which is that sense making is a method of disciplining the cacophony of diversity and complexity without homogenizing it. And this brings me to a key point here, that although I'm talking about the sense making that consumers do, sense making is also a skill that researchers need and can develop. And part of that skill is disciplining the cacophony of diversity and complexity without homogenizing it. It's about finding patterns in data without suppressing everything else. Another key point, which comes from Sally Matlas and Marlis Christensen, is that people work to understand issues and events that are ambiguous and confusing. And I put the emphasis here on work, because sense making is to some degree subconscious, unconscious. We don't know we're doing it, but we actually do know that we're doing it part of the time. We're aware of the fact and do it deliberately. So this kind of just gets away from this whole idea of some things are, you know, I don't know, all sorts of things are unconscious and we don't know what we're thinking. Not true at all, and certainly not relevant to sense making. So there are, as researchers, I'm speaking as a researcher, 3 sense-making applications. So the first is that, as I've really already drawn attention to, sense-making is something done by professionals. And I've said here researchers, semioticians, cultural analysts, and designers. We are all people looking for meaning in complex information. So we're making sense of that complex information. And part of that sense making by its very nature, if we go back to the Deborah and Kona quote, is that we recognize that this is a shifting world, and we recognize that we're looking for a plausible understanding of it. So this is a skill that researchers can learn. Sense making is also something done in organizations, and Carl Weick's work has been to observe and understand the way in which groups in organizations and the way in which leaders in organizations make sense and then move forward. And then thirdly, which is really the focus of this particular presentation, there's sense making by individuals such as consumers, customers, and the like. And this is about understanding how they make sense of those situations. So as researchers, we actually have a dual or triple focus here. But I'm going to focus on the skills that researchers need to understand personal sense making, to understand when the people, respondents, when they're doing it. So the first thing we need to do is to design research that reveals it. And the question is, well, do we do that all the time? No, as I've already suggested, people only sense make when there's ambiguity. So what we're interested in doing is identifying environments that are fluid. We're identifying environments where there's a shifting world. If it's highly changeable, it's very likely that people will sense make. Then if we observe that people are delaying action or not doing what they say they will do. So for example, quite a lot in the retiree market, people often don't retire. They put it off, put it off, put it off, put it off because it's too hard. That's an example of sense making, or an example of the need for sense making in a sense. And the sustainability world is one where it's said that people don't do what they say they will do. And I'm actually going to question that whole assumption. But we also want to design research if the problem is one that seems hard to solve rationally. Is it something that, so again, sustainability is a great example of that. It's not like the doorbell rings, I'm going to answer the door. There's so much conflicting information, a lot of which is out of reach, a lot of which is changing, that it's not possible to identify just a straight cause and effect, that we have to find other ways of solving that problem as individuals and as consumers. So another way to think about how we design research is to understand what sense-making behavior looks like. So if you've observed this in your market, then you've observed a perfect project for sense-making. It's like a journey, it's like a customer journey, but it's characterized more by delays because people don't know whether or how to start what they're doing. And once underway, it's full of loops and gaps and dilemmas rather than stages and pain points. So you can think of it, if you like, as a type of customer journey, or a type of often a potential customer journey. It's multifaceted. So these are some of the things that you will see if you observe people in sense-making mode, or if you're doing it yourself. So I've talked about the shifting world already. So it's dynamic and ongoing. Sense-making doesn't stop. This is like, I've answered the door, I'm done. Sense-making keeps going. And when you've made sense of it, you can stop. Doing something helps you think is a key component of sense making, that action is part of thinking instead of separate from thinking. Sense making is sensory. We notice and label cues. So there might be things we see, things we hear, things we and use any of our senses, things we touch, and are often overwhelmed. If we're overwhelmed by that sensory input, then we need to make sense of it. Sense making is social, and we can be subconsciously influenced by cultural experience as well. I've got an example later on about how social sense making is. Well, actually, point 5 captures it as well, that talking helps people think. So one of the ways in which we help to make sense of things, help ourselves make sense of things, is by talking, sometimes to ourselves, but also to other people. We might bounce ideas off other people. We might say something and gauge the reaction that we're getting from other people, and we go, okay, they don't agree with me. It's about framing and reframing. That's all part of the shifting world concept. It can be retrospective, so we might look back and think, well, that's how I did it, that's how I figured it out. There are arguments too for saying it's forward-looking. And as I've said already, we are aiming for plausibility, not perfection. If you're in the middle of chaos, perfection is not what you're looking for. You just want to figure it all out. So, a personal opinion, in my opinion, conventional research into sustainability that doesn't take sense making into account, it falls short. And one of the reasons is labeling. So labeling problems occur when the researcher uses terms like sustainability, like environment, without knowing what these terms mean to people. Absolutely key to sense-making research is allowing people to label themselves. Because when you label yourself, you define the boundaries of your own world, and you define the parameters of your own world. If you let someone else determine what those parameters are, then, well, that someone else is not going to really understand you. The labeling is crucial. I'll come back to that point. Sustainability research conventionally has, I think, assumed that you could say to people, well, what do you believe about protecting the planet, say, or becoming a vegan or whatever, and then watching what people, and then asking people what they do, as if the knowledge comes before the action. And sense-making theory says that's not the case, because it's shifting all the time, that your knowledge comes because of your action sometimes. And so what we can sometimes see where it's said that people don't do what they say they're going to do, is because we've got that the wrong way around. Intention problems, I've really already said this, they occur when the researcher assumes a direct connection between intentions and behavior. But the other point is that these intentions can be vague, they can be generalized, where behavior is very specific. So one of the problems with conventional research that takes that approach is that you're saying to people, well, what's your general vague kind of feeling about this? And then why haven't you done this specific thing? Sense making doesn't even try to do that. It's a waste of time. Prediction problems follow. So these occur when the researcher assumes that research participants have a single identity, when in reality we have multiple selves. So again, from this sustainability perspective, we might ask people whether they, how likely they are to recycle, how likely they are to cut down their meat consumption, how likely they are to do whatever. And then assume that will follow. Now, if we're talking about my silly example of how likely are you to answer the door, well, it's pretty obvious I'm going to answer the door if the doorbell rings, because that's a simple thing. But for something like sustainability, it's not just what I eat that's that counts, like am I going to eat less meat, or how I throw away my rubbish. It's which is me as an individual and my own behavior. I'm also many other people. So I'm a social being. I exist in relationships. So I'm a businesswoman, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a friend. And all of those multiple selves are important to me. And there's another way of looking at multiple selves as well, which is that the idea that I am the person I am, but I might also have an ought self, the person I feel I ought to be. I ought to recycle my rubbish more often. An ideal self. So all of those things, the idea of multiple selves, if we don't take it into account in social belief research, we're just missing everything. We're not missing everything. We're missing a lot. So how do we make sense of sustainability? What I did was conduct a pilot study with vegetarians and vegans. So clearly it was food related, but it gives us a lot of insight into plant-based foods, for example. So the objectives were, I wanted to know how people navigate this world. I wanted to know how they choose what to support. How do they decide if they're a vegan or an almost vegan or whatever they are, how they work that out. Tension is absolutely crucial to understanding sense making. I've already referred to the fact that there are dilemmas, and I'm going to come back to that. And change. It's a shifting world. How do people change? So these aren't the objectives you would see in a typical research study, but this is crucial to sense-making qualitative research. There can be 3 steps. I've put 2. The first one can be collecting quantitative data. I'm just not going to cover that now. What we do need to do is do some cultural analysis. Much of culture influences subconsciously, not all of it, but quite a lot of it influences subconscious. So we can't necessarily ask people about that. So we need to do analysis separately, which means understanding how sustainability is talked about in our culture, what are the cultural norms, and what are the symbols and rituals. There are other examples. There will be examples on my website of these. I'm only going to go really briefly in this particular presentation. The second part of sense-making qualitative research is conversation. I prefer that to the word interview. The individual conversation is about the person's world and their relationships and the tensions and conflicts they experience trying to do what they're doing. And again, that's not necessarily the way we would approach a typical research project on sustainability. I need to add, because this wasn't clear when I spoke about it earlier this year, that this can be part of a bigger project. So I'm not saying that that's all you do. Your clients might have other objectives. Clearly, you need to answer those. But part of answering those is to understand sense making. And this is the understanding sense making bit. So this is what we found in our pilot study. It's just a brief look at the cultural discourse. As I say, it's better and more fully explained elsewhere. But it is a world of absolutes in terms of the way people talk and write about sustainability and veganism. Animal agriculture is the most destructive industry facing the planet today, said Cowspiracy. Maybe is that debatable? It's emotive. Animals are spared from slaughter, said Peter, which is typical of the way the persuasive language that they use. It's also judgmental. And this is from the Harvard Business Review. Few consumers who report positive attitudes towards eco-friendly products and services follow through with their wallets. In one recent survey, 65% said they want to buy purpose-driven brands that advocate sustainability, yet only about 26% actually do so. There's judgment there. And from a sense-making perspective, there's no need to be judgment there. What we actually need to do is ask a different lot of questions, and we would understand people better. So what we find when we do ask better questions is that making sensibility is about you. It's what you call yourself is crucial. Do you remember I talked about labeling? It defines the boundaries that you've set yourself. I can't understand you until I know the boundaries that you personally have set yourself. And I asked our participants in this, who all had a largely or exclusively meat-free diet, what they called themselves and one of them in particular said, "I am not a vegan," and demarcating yourself against veganism is really very important to many vegetarians, a topic which I won't go into too much now because it's not the focus of this presentation. I've talked about multiple cells, and one of the key ways to understanding the sustainability from a vegan and vegetarian perspective is understanding their multiple selves. For a start, it sometimes overlaps with food preferences. So this is just one. There's a lot of marketing directed towards vegans and vegetarians and people pro-sustainability for burgers. It seems to be all about burgers. And so, of course, as you probably know, you can buy burgers that look, smell, and everything else like meat. So people get the meat experience without actually having animals around or having to kill them. Now, that's all fine and good. But if you don't want to eat fast food is not your sense of, I want to be organic, I want to make my own fresh pasta, that's part of who you are, then all that marketing about beetroot that looks like, anyway, burgers, misses the point. Making sense of sustainability means understanding that it's about making it work. This is about that plausibility thing again. A quote from a vegan: try it for a month. You don't have to be strict about it. Do it within your capabilities. Try as hard as you can. If you get through the month, reflect on that. And if it was easy, say, I can do this and keep going. If you want to, you could go find that Deborah Ancona quote again about that shifting world. This is exactly it. This is how people become vegans. The other way that people become vegans and pro-sustainability is resolving everyday dilemmas. This is like, well, how do I do this? And one of the top picture there is about, well, how do I find the products in the store? Now, what a lot of plant-based foods marketers have done is to put their meat-like products in the meat aisle. And that's what this is. And that's great if you're someone who's pro-sustainability and loves meat. But quite a lot of vegans, vegetarians don't love meat. They don't want to be reminded of meat. And so they won't go to that aisle and they won't see it and they won't want all of those sensory cues. They'll find that overwhelming to have all those sensory cues about meat. So that's a dilemma. Where do you find it? The shoes are a dilemma because they're made of leather, and if you're pro-sustainability or vegan, you don't want to wear leather. And so what can happen is that people try alternatives. It's a shifting world, remember. And they perhaps plastic shoes or something, and some of those end up in landfill. And once you discover that it's a shifting world, things change, you discover and frame and reframe, you go, okay, that wasn't a very good idea, what else can I do? So it's evolving and ongoing. The bottom picture is about, it compares I'm back to burgers again, a meat burger and a veggie burger designed to look like meat. And one of the dilemmas that people have is, if you're a vegan and you go to a vegan restaurant, you know absolutely there's no meat there. If you're a vegan and you go to a restaurant that says it has vegan burgers and you get one that looks like meat, is it? Is it meat? So one of the things we need to do to help people be vegan, if you like, and help pro-sustainability, help sustainability, is to understand that there are some dynamics going on in that market that maybe aren't being met yet. This is one of my favorites. It's from a young guy that I interviewed, who's a vegetarian, and a vegetarian because absolutely disgusted at the thought of animals being killed. And this was a question of whether he would kiss his girlfriend after she'd eaten a meat burger. They worked it out, but anyway, I don't know. I think possibly he changed girlfriends. The bottom picture is it's a similar story. It's about the rawness of meat, really, and the sensory element of it that we sometimes forget. So if you want to be pro-environment, eco-friendly, vegan, etc., there are drivers and barriers to making it work. And on the green is the drivers that if we understand that it is fluid and ongoing, that people might start puritanically and then kind of work out how to indulge themselves and be normal human beings, then then we can help make it work. We can help people make it work by getting them to talk about it, and bonding with friends through talk and shared stories encourages people to be pro-sustainability. The one in the middle is find your boundary, which this is something that each individual really needs to do. Are they going to eat cheese? Some vegetarians are vegetarians, not vegans, because they love cheese so much, or maybe it's chocolate. Social, on the other side, these are the barriers, these are the things that make it hard, and these are the reasons why some people don't follow through. Social, so managing conflict with family and older friends can be very difficult, and so we have stories of people who will avoid family gatherings and they'll avoid going out with friends if they think there aren't going to be plant-based foods available to them, or if they feel that they're going to be judged. We find that people are lying to their friends and family by saying, I've already eaten, when they haven't, which brings in all sorts of questions about your personal identity and sense of self. And there are people who've given up for this very reason. One of the things that makes people give up is that they jump in too quickly and then they struggle because there's a lack of variety. That's just the way it is at the moment. And again, that's one thing that we can help people with. One of the reasons people don't follow through is because there isn't anything to follow through with. Some nice quotes. Can one person change the world? No. Can I try to do something about it? Yes. It feels like a good thing to be doing. Why are we judging these people? They think this is a good thing. I can't chow down on that cute cow. It's one of those nice examples of how emotional this is. We sometimes forget that being eco-friendly and following through sounds all totally rational. Much of it is not. It's driven by disgust at the thought of killing animals, or love of animals as well, which is the opposite of that, and socialization, which is the bottom picture. So to finish up, the key points I'm making is that to understand and make sense of sustainability from a vegan and vegetarian perspective, because that's who I did the pilot with, we can understand a few things. That consumers seem to initially create their own boundaries. They say pretty much, I'll go this far, but that's as far as I'm going for now. It's an exploratory boundary finding process, and it's obvious, therefore, that our research needs to explore their boundary finding process. Being an advocate for sustainability is a balancing act between social and cultural forces on the one hand and personal experience and needs on the other. I just talked about that a moment ago. Our research reveals the tensions and dilemmas that people face when they sense make, and it's about social identity, self-preservation and practicality, plausibility, making it work, I would add. The tensions and dilemmas are often the trigger to behavior change. So that can go both ways. So that if the dilemma is, I can't find good food and my family hate me, then I might give up or not be fully committed to being pro-sustainability, pro-environment. And it can go the other way as well. So that's it. That's my talk on deciphering life, a qualitative research method for understanding other people's sense making, where we researchers ourselves are using our sense making skills to do that. You can contact me by email, on Twitter and on LinkedIn. Thank you.